Today I am going to talk about suicide. And saying that word, I know that the YouTube algorithm or social media in general, sometimes they like to hide content that the AI hears saying that word or using that word, or if they see it in text or whatnot. Um, I'm going to go ahead and use it anyways. I will probably intermittently use other wording in place of the word suicide, but I'm also not going to censor myself for the sake of this video. I'm going to trust that Spirit is going to find a way to get this video in front of the people that it needs to get in front of. I do know that TikTok, for example, and also if you hear any strange noises from behind my camera, my senior dog is about 2 feet away and he's intermittently snoring and making some strange noises. So I just want to preface that right off the bat. But as I was saying, I know that TikTok, for example, if their AI even hears the word suicide spoken in a video, they will take the video down, they will censor the video, they will sometimes even remove the accounts of the people who used the word, and so on and so forth. And as a result, people on that platform use the word unalived in the place of the word suicide, the word death, the word murder, and many other scenarios, which really sort of grates on me. I can't stand the word unalived, but that's another story for another day. I haven't scripted this video. I haven't even bullet pointed this video. I'm going to freeform. I'm just going to let it flow. So, the first thing I want to address is the fear around the word suicide. It's something that I don't wholeheartedly, I was going to say I don't wholeheartedly understand, but I guess I can understand I guess I can understand the motivation behind it sometimes. No, I can't. I can't. I think we do need to start using the word freely. I mean, it's disrespectful to the people who have lost loved ones through suicide to hide the word under a rock. Plain and simple, their loved one passed through suicide, which was caused by an illness of some form. And to deny that is egregious, in my opinion. Further, not using the word suicide out loud does not cause people who are struggling with those same illnesses that led to the suicide of those who are already on the other side in spirit, people who are still living in physical bodies who are struggling with those same things that those who have transitioned to spirit once struggled with. Not using the word in front of them does not make their problems go away, does not make their illnesses go away, does not make their struggles go away, does not make them forget that they're struggling. So we are doing nobody any favors by hiding the word suicide under a rock. That said, when I was going through psychic mediumship development, I was taught not to use the word. I was taught and trained to use more sensitive wording. I was taught and trained to say things like, throughout the years, I usually say crossed him or herself over. So if I have a loved one who passed through suicide, I was trained to say, he or she is saying he crossed himself over, he or she is saying he crossed by his own hand, he or she is taking responsibility for his or her passing. We were told not to say he or she passed through suicide. So that is primarily what I have done over the years. However, I have naturally found myself gravitating more the last several months to using the words pass through suicide rather than dancing around the issue. Since suicide has touched my own life, but also as I have realized that 9.5 times out of 10, when I use the wording with clients whose people pass through suicide, when I say things like he or she is taking responsibility for his passing, or he or she is saying that that they crossed themselves over, they'll say, oh, yes, he died by suicide. They say the words. Like, they don't want me as the medium or you as a friend or a bystander or somebody in their lives not using that word. I sent an email out to my email list. I don't know if it was about 3 weeks ago now or so, um, which I sent emails out to my email list that are kind of intuitively led as I'm drawn to. Sometimes things will come to me in meditation. Sometimes my own spirit loved ones will kind of nudge me. Just intuitively led things that I draft up and I send out to my list. I'll put a link in the description to get on my list if you're interested. But I sent an email out to them about how my entire duration of my practice as a professional psychic medium, which I'm coming up on 4 years of doing this professionally, reading for clients, I have had a large influx of spirit loved ones who have transitioned through suicide have always come to me. And I talked in that email about how most psychic mediums will find that they have sort of a commonality of a type of spirit person or a type of passing that they kind of find themselves quote unquote specializing in with the spirit realm. So, for example, some psychic mediums might tend to get a lot of child spirits, or some psychic mediums might find that they get a lot of moms in spirit. So they have a lot of clients who book with them who maybe they're middle aged and they lost their moms fairly young. So I would consider that to be, people who lost their moms before they themselves turned, 35, those sorts of things. I, throughout my duration of doing this, the almost, 4 years I've been working professionally thus far, as I told my email list, have 25 to 30% of my readings are suicide readings, are readings where people are coming wanting to connect to a loved one who they have lost through suicide. Or let me revise that, through suicide or through having caused their own transition, meaning overdose. So suicides and overdoses are 30% of my readings. And that is not the norm when I've spoken to other psychic mediums. And that is not of statistical relevancy when you look at, death statistics in the United States. 30% of people are not, suicide rates are high and overdose rates are high, yes, but they're not 30% of deaths. So that is definitely I don't want to call it an area of specialty. I don't like that verbiage, but there's definitely a reason why I've been chosen for that particular work or that standard of work within this profession. And I wrote in that email about how in June my brother was home visiting from out of state, and he's a developing psychic medium. He's working on his mediumship also. And we were talking about this exact subject. And I said to him, I was telling him about how 25, I either said 20% to 30% or 25% to 30% of, the spirit people that I work with or of my readings are, people who have caused their own transition to spirit. And I said, don't you think that's odd? And he said, my brother said to me, he said, well, there must be a reason, Mary, why they've chosen you for that. There must be a reason. And that was in June. And 4 weeks later, we had a very close, family member cross themselves over. A very close member passed through suicide. So it was like an intuitive conversation, a conversation that needed to be had, but also I've come to realize so many things the last few months about why I've been placed on this journey to work with spirit people who have crossed themselves over either through suicide or through choices that they knew could lead to their death, but they didn't intentionally set out to do it in that moment, such as overdose. And I've come to learn a lot about suicide both through my work as a psychic medium and just as a human. So I think I want to talk a little bit about that. I think that suicide is something that so many people, they don't understand it. And I think we're getting better. I think we're better than we were 10 years ago as a culture and as a society. But I think it's also something that we don't conceptualize until we have to conceptualize it. It's one of those, it's never going to happen to me sorts of scenarios. But I can tell you that the whole, I don't know if the term is 5 degrees of separation. Eventually, suicide is going to touch your life. It's not a matter of when. It's not a matter of it's a matter of when. We are the one commonality, well, there's lots of commonalities, but one of the large commonalities of spirit people that I've worked with who passed through suicide was or is that even those of them who maybe did show warning signs, or those of them who their loved ones knew that it was a possibility of happening at some point, they were sharing this much of what was going on in their heads and in their hearts and inside of their bodies. Every single spirit person I worked with who passed that way, nobody was bearing all. Nobody was. And a lot of them talk about how they were just too tired to share. They were too tired to open up. They were too tired to talk about what they were feeling and thinking and experiencing. And if they weren't too tired, scratch that. There is no if they weren't too tired. They were too tired. But the other aspect at play with a lot of them was they couldn't even conceptualize or wrap their metaphorical arms around the problem themselves or even necessarily put it into words. So if they themselves couldn't even wrap their arms around it inside of their own minds, how could they verbalize it in order to ask for help, in order to explain to people around them what was going on inside, if it was so difficult to even put their own mental inner vocabulary towards it? So when I talk about how suicide is going to touch all of our lives at some point, it's because it's like a silent, for so many people it's a silent epidemic, it's a silent killer. It's People don't talk about what's going on inside their minds, inside their hearts, because they can't. And even if we know that somebody is troubled from the outside looking in, we know a fraction of the trouble. And there's always somebody in our life like that. And even if we know somebody in our life who we cognitively understand is troubled, there is another person in our lives who we have no clue that they're troubled because they fall into the category of being unable to talk about it because they don't understand it themselves. I've also learned a lot about how in families, when this occurs, when suicide occurs or overdose occurs, there is always at least one person, if not multiple people, who literally do not get it. And they very ignorantly, but it's a part of their, ignorantly, but yet as a part of their own grieving process, a part of their own inner journey, blame the person who died. They blame them. Um, there's still quite a few people walking around who don't understand the inner workings of emotions, the inner workings of the mind, the inner workings of mental health, and the bigger picture of everything. And spirit loved ones bring that up a lot. They bring it up a lot. They bring up those people a lot. Because let's face it, I mean, the majority of the people who come to me for a mediumship reading are not those people. They're not the people who don't understand mental health and don't understand suicide and don't understand substance abuse disorder and drug use. It's the people who are usually in the opposite position. But the spirit loved ones will still quite often bring up the other individuals in that person's life by relationship or by name or whatever, and talk about it. And the spirit people on the other side, understand the journey of those who are angry with them or those who don't understand their decision, or understand what was going on, or are just mad at them or think they were, this, that, or the other thing to have done what they did or to have had happened what did. They don't love them any less. They are not offended. They are not angry back at them. They are more so empathetic for them. I'm trying to help them grow and heal. So, but as a psychic medium, I have come to observe that dynamic within families, that there is always, like, I can't, I mean, it's not always brought up in every single reading, but it's super common for there to be at least one person. And I have had a few readings where that is the person who has come to me for a reading. I have had instances where it's like the client wants to angrily essentially yell at the spirit person through me, and then it turns into like they want to yell at me as if I'm their person and treating me as if I'm the person. don't book a reading with a psychic medium if you're in that space. Book a reading with a counselor, okay? That's not what psychic mediumship is for. I'm not a punching bag, okay? Nor am I a trained therapist. But it's okay to have those emotions, but I think that we need to make steps forward as a society and a culture in terms of understanding that mental health is health. And refusing to use the word suicide is not the way to get there. That's like saying a heart attack is not a heart attack and trying to find some other way to use some synonym for the word heart attack so we don't have to say the word heart attack, and we don't do that. We don't even hide when somebody passes from lung cancer that was a result of smoking. We don't hide that. We don't try to come up with a different verbiage for that. We're not, but yet when somebody causes their own passing more directly, it's like we censor the word. And the other aspect is that oftentimes the issues at hand were or are, I'm talking in the aspect of people who are now in spirit and no longer on the physical earth. So using the word were, because they don't take their struggles with them. They're 100% whole on the other side, whole and happy. And they've shed their physical brain and they've shed their physical body, which is where all the issues were. The issues were not with their soul. Their issues were with their bodies. So understand that the problems are not there any longer. But when they were in the physical, the issues were very multi-layered. Okay. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, somebody was depressed, so they died through suicide. It's oftentimes very many like other little minute problems, or even like undiagnosed issues, or this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, and then the illness laid on top of it, and they couldn't handle all of the think of it like a tiramisu cake. If you've ever seen like a tiramisu cake where it's very like layered, you can kind of like peel the layers off. It's like that. I know people often use onions as a metaphor too, if you want to think of it like that, but it's even more intricate and delicate. So what comes through for me is like a tiramisu cake, not even an onion, because tiramisu is much more delicate. If you peel a layer off, it could rip very easily, and that's what the layers are like. Very, very, very delicate thin layers. And then the illness or the predispositions or the illnesses laying on top of all of those layers or incidences or traumas or whatever the cases may be, it's individual, all piled on top. And it's like an explosion inside the mind. And that's nothing that can be helped by an individual person. The other thing that I wanted to talk about before I finish up here is the concept of bad seeds or bad people. And sometimes when suicide happens or overdose happens, people will point, the living will point at the person who died, especially the people who don't understand that it happened or why it happened. And they'll say, well, they were a bad person. They couldn't get their act together. Or, well, he was always a bad seed since he was a little boy or she was a little girl. And we need to absolutely stop doing that, because that is not true. There's no such thing as a bad seed or a bad person. There is none. There's no such thing. So when we come into this world, when we are born into this world, we are all born in the exact same condition. We come in as a being of light, as a being of love. Think of us being born into this world as a big ball of light. That's like our soul. It's nothing but pure, pure, pure love. When we come through the birth canal as a little newborn infant, and we have all of our senses, and we have a brain, and we're born into surroundings, and we look around, and we're this beautiful being of light inside of this body with these sensory abilities that are now able to be impressed upon and molded and melded, and why all these wires in our head, our neurological capabilities that are all over the place. We couldn't control the brain we were given. We couldn't control any traumas that were placed upon us. And we couldn't control the way that our wiring perceived traumas, the way that our wiring buried traumas or dealt with traumas, and we couldn't perceive or we couldn't control the way that we took in sensory input, be it how we saw, how we heard, how we felt, and then how our wiring interpreted those inputs and what our wiring did with those inputs. We had no control. Okay, everybody processes those things differently. Everybody does. We also had no control about the traumas that ran through generations in our families. We had no control over so many aspects. Okay, and none of that makes anybody a bad seed or a bad person. If somebody was born with, wires crossing here, and somebody else was born with wires crossing here, I'm talking about inside their head, and somebody else took an input this way and maybe processed it in area, XYZ, and somebody else processed it this way, and somebody else is just a perfect little angel who did everything perfectly by somebody else's standards, and these other people didn't. That doesn't make those other people bad people or bad seeds. Nobody was born into this world as a cute, newborn baby with this being of light inside of them with the immediate instinct of, I'm going to hurt people. I'm going to make horrible choices. I am here for that. No. Nobody was a 1 month old, a 4 week old, a 1 year old thinking to themselves, or their soul telling their body, I'm here to wreak havoc on all the people around me. I'm here to cause nothing but pain and disturbance. Nobody, no. So we need to stop with that. There's no such thing as a bad person, a bad seed, especially when it comes to souls. But when it comes to people as well, we need to back it up and look at it from the broad level perspective of what creates the human experience. Now, does this mean that you shouldn't insert boundaries for your own growth, your own healing? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You absolutely need boundaries. And if somebody's actions are something you do not agree with, if somebody's behaviors hurt you, if somebody is a person you do not want to be around for various reasons, absolutely set boundaries. Absolutely do not include that person in your life. I am not saying that whatsoever. But I am also saying that they ultimately did not create who they later became. What I'm saying is they did not come into the world without intention. They did not come into the world as a bad seed, a bad human, a bad individual. And there's no such thing as a bad soul either. That is what I'm saying. But I am saying that you do need to protect yourself as well, that there is such a thing as self-preservation, personal growth, personal healing, and you needing to take actions for your own self to flourish. Yes. But it helps no one. And it certainly doesn't help the cause for mental health and the understanding of suicide and substance use in our country, or in the world, I should say, for us to walk around pointing fingers and spewing out all this nonsense either. The final thing that I'll touch on before I close off here is that there's never, ever, ever any blame to be had from the spirit realm when it comes to suicide and overdose. And when I'm talking about blame to be had, I'm talking about them pointing at us for not having done enough for them. Never. That is the absolute commonality, is that they never want us to feel guilt for not having done enough for them. It is the exact opposite. They're often talking about how I couldn't verbalize my needs. I couldn't help myself. I see why I was the way I was. I see the aspects of my life that formed me to be the way that I was. I see what all caused this now. And they'll also come forward very often and they'll say, I see all the ways that you tried to help me. I see when you did this and I see when you did that. And that I didn't, listen, or I pushed you away, or I was incredibly difficult to deal with. They take responsibility. They never, ever, ever push responsibility onto us because, again, they see the big level macro picture of all of this. They will bring up, say an argument that the two of you had. They will often play it out for me in my mind's eye, and they will show themselves being stubborn and storming out, or they will bring up how you maybe had to execute tough love with them. Again, going back to those boundaries that are often necessary. They will bring up about how they understand that you needed to do that. It was not only best for them at the time, and they understand that now, but it was necessary for you as well as others around you. And they understand that, and they get that, and they love you for it. They bring that up all the time. So again, this goes back to these causes of death being driven by illnesses. And we would never ask, hey, do I have somebody over there who passed from a heart attack who is coming forward blaming me for their heart disease? We would never wonder that. So we would never wonder if somebody is asking that who passed from a heart attack, hey, are you blaming me for this? Then we shouldn't be wondering if those who pass through suicide are blaming us for any other aspect of their passing, because it is parallel lines. Mental illness and physical illness are parallel lines. The only difference is the organ of the body that is sick. So the next time that you want to go there with your guilt, I know it is more difficult than it sounds and easier said than done. But think about a man who died from a heart attack coming forward and his wife saying to me, Mary, is he angry at me that he had cardiovascular disease and passed from a heart attack? And ask yourself if that sounds silly, and then apply it to your loved one who passed from suicide or overdose. Remind yourself that it was their brain as compared to somebody's heart, and that those are the same scenario. They really, 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 really are. If you've made it this far, let me know your thoughts. Drop a comment below. I do talk often here on my channel about spirit, the spirit world, the afterlife, mediumship, and my passion, which is helping you learn to connect with your own loved ones on the other side. So go ahead and subscribe if any of that is something you would be interested in hearing more about. Until next time, much love. Bye.